Thank you to everyone joining us today from across the country and around the world. I'm Abby Schwab, Vice President of Programming here at Conscious Capitalism, Inc. On behalf of the CCI team, we appreciate you taking the time to learn and grow in community with us. Today, we're excited to welcome Marcus Sheridan, who will shed light on the importance of evolving sales strategies to focus on trust and transparency, how businesses can effectively deliver on what their customers both want and need, and the most critical tools to employ in digital marketing today. As many of you know, conscious capitalism is a philosophy that emphasizes the human nature of business, as well as a movement of business leaders from around the world working to change the practice and perception of capitalism as a means to elevate humanity. Conscious Capitalism, Inc. is a nonprofit, nonprofit organization dedicated to catalyzing that movement by creating learning opportunities like today's session and building systems of support for practicing conscious capitalism through our senior leader network membership and engagement with our local chapters. Several times a month, CCI offers virtual gatherings as a way for community to see how this philosophy takes shape in the leadership journeys and the business practices of those in our network. Today's gathering will run for about 45 minutes. Marcus will present for about 25 minutes, and then we'll transition to audience questions during the last 10 to 15 minutes of our session. So please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen, and we will try to get to as many questions as we can during our time together. If you have any technical questions or issues, please email us at info@consciouscapitalism.org. Now, I'm thrilled to introduce acclaimed speaker, entrepreneur, and marketing expert, Marcus Sheridan. He's been dubbed a web marketing guru by the New York Times and was named by Forbes as one of 20 speakers you don't want to miss. So it's great that you're all here and not missing him. His best-selling book, They Ask, You Answer, has been named one of the 5 best marketing books of all time by Book Authority. Marcus is a highly sought-after global speaker and consultant in the digital sales and marketing space, working with hundreds of businesses and brands alike to achieve their potential in a rapidly evolving marketplace, ultimately helping them to become the most trusted voice in their respective industry. Marcus also has run his own successful fiberglass pool business, so he's speaking as a practitioner of his own experiences. And Marcus, I saw you at a conference this time last year and took copious notes, pages and pages of them. We're excited to have you here with us today and to share your insights with the conscious capitalism community. So I'm going to hand it over to you, and we'll get to some questions with you a little bit later on in the session.
Yeah, that's the best, right? Is hopefully we can induce enough thoughts here that there's some questions all about application. I think, though, at the same time, as I present this, many of your initial questions as you're watching this are going to be answered, everybody. And so really happy that we can have this conversation. So let's dive into it. I want to start with a couple of trends that you probably have heard, but I think they're fundamental to all of us as business leaders, as marketers and sales professionals, et cetera. And they're the conversations that we should be having with our leadership teams. So the first one is this 80% study that was done by Forrester. It's been done by others. Studies show that today, the average buyer, and this was a B2B study, right? The average buyer is roughly 70 to 80% through that buyer's journey before they reach out to a sales team. So this is really fascinating, right? Because if we went back in time, internet's just getting started, let's say it's like 1995, 96, and we said, how far through the buyer's journey was the typical buyer? 1995, 96. If I had to make a guess, you're probably thinking roughly the same thing. I think 20 to 30%, right? So today we're at 80% roughly on average, right? Sometimes it's a little higher, lower, but we all agree that it's grown so much. Question is, where's it going to be over the next 5, 10, 15 years? What does this mean for sales? What does this mean for marketing, right? Because it means that marketing now, at least how we've traditionally perceived it, is handling the majority of that sales experience. And so sales has to adjust, so does marketing. Marketing has to be more responsible for ROI, revenue. Sales has to be more responsible for some of those initial marketing activities. Wish we had a lot of time to talk about that, but we've got to accept that our buyers are more informed than they've ever been, and they're vetting us more than they've ever done. This is all of us that are watching right now. Okay, so that's the first trend. We know that. Second trend is a newer one in terms of the actual number of the study. This came out from Gartner not long ago. And they've said this, it's so fascinating and it's so true. And it's not something I necessarily celebrate because in a way it's a hard pill, but it's an important pill that we have to swallow because each one of us is a reason for the trend in the first place. And that is this: today, 33% of all buyers say they would prefer to have a seller-free sales experience. Seller-free sales experience. So what does this really mean? Does this mean we just absolutely hate salespeople? I don't think that's what it means, but it means this. And hopefully we're aligned with this, and that is you and me, we don't want to talk to the company, to a salesperson, until we feel we are good and ready. We don't want to make a mistake. We want to feel like we're informed. We want to feel like we're not going to get taken advantage of. And so, by the way, this number for millennials is 44%. And of course, if I asked you, do you think the number is going to go up? You'd say, yeah, I'm sure it's probably going to go up. Now, this doesn't mean human relationships isn't fundamental to sales processes and to trust, of course. But what it does mean is we've got to recognize that if we don't give them what they want on the front end, we're not responding to the marketplace. We're in denial. So my quick story, I used to be a pool guy. I started a fiberglass swimming pool company with a couple buddies in 2001 called River Pools. And things were going okay for us up until this particular date and number. Do you remember the date? Do you remember the number? Yeah, that's the day of the crash. Good or bad day for pool guys? Not a very good day for swimming pool companies. The bottom number on that day represents, if you're really a good historian, the Dow Jones. So that's where the Dow went that day. And after this day, within 48 hours, we had 5 people that had put down a deposit on the pool. They withdrew that deposit and they said, oh my goodness, we just can't do this. We're too worried about the economy. So we lost $250,000 in business in the first 48 hours. In the coming weeks, it got worse and worse. And by January of 2009, we're going over that proverbial edge. And I feel like, oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my business. I talked to 3 consultants. All 3 said the same thing. You should file bankruptcy. The problem was, if I filed bankruptcy at the time, I would have lost my home, my 2 business partners would have lost their homes, and our 16 employees would have lost their jobs, as many of you can probably relate to. It's just, that's the life of the small business owner. And so we had to figure out how to get back over that edge. We didn't have much time. We certainly didn't have much money. And that's what we're going to talk about today. And that's the beauty of pain and suffering, right? Because when the markets dip and when we struggle as companies, sometimes we'll do that which we always felt we should have done, but we hadn't taken the initiative to do. And so it was during this time that I started to really lean into the internet, these fancy phrases like inbound marketing, content marketing, social media blogging, all that stuff that you and I have heard now a million times since then. But what I heard in my simple pool guy mind was, Marcus, if you just obsess over your customers' questions and you're willing to address them on your website, their fears, their worries, their concerns, their issues, honestly and transparently talk about them when others will not in your industry, through text, through video on your website, you might save your business. So I said, well, shoot, that's certainly something that we could do. And so I like to name things. And so I called it They Ask, You Answer. And I said, we're going to become the Wikipedia of pools. And I brainstormed every single question I'd ever received about swimming pools, good, bad, and ugly, and started answering them one by one every single night for a couple of years. And what happened is we would go on to become the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. And then when we would become the fastest growing manufacturer of fiberglass pools in the US, then we became the first franchise of fiberglass pool companies in the US. And today there's probably a River Pools near you if you live in a major city in the US, and it's just exploding in that regard. And it's been an amazing ride. And not only has it been amazing on that side of the business, but of course, They Ask You Answer became just a business book that has been read now all over the world. And I constantly get these messages and emails from companies saying, it's just completely changed our business. And it's amazing what transparency can do. And this honest approach, it's just so refreshing. And you're going to hear about this, of course, today. But I've got one fear for everybody that's watching. Before we dive into the meat of this, I just need to address this fear. It's a very human, it's a natural fear, but it's a fear nonetheless. And so let's get it out of the way, and then we're going to jump in, right? So the big fear that I have, because look, I do this for a living. I get to go and speak with audiences around the world, and really every audience, you can almost divide them in half. And first half of the audience is like, we could do that. I could see how that could apply to me. Sure, that would work for us, for my industry, for my business, for my department, whatever that thing is. But then the second half would say, Marcus, that might work for you as a pool guy, but you see, we're different. We're different. And this is what we can sometimes naturally fall in the habit of doing, especially in a learning environment like this, right? And so here's my ask for you. Today, we're going to focus on one fundamental component to business. and that is trust. If I said to you, is trust fundamental to your business right now? What would you say? You'd say, yeah, of course it is, Marcus. If I said to you, is trust going to be fundamental to your business in 10 years or 20 years? What would you say? You'd say, yes, Marcus. Yes, it's going to be fundamental, right? It's a big, big deal. So today I'm going to show you quickly in a way, in a framework that's absolutely beautiful, especially if you haven't read the book, you're going to say, oh my goodness, this is so obvious. It'll help you become definitively the most trusted voice in your space. I know it because it's happened over and over again. In fact, it's happened with a multiplicity of businesses. You see, I have an agency. The agency has about 75 employees, and we help consult, guide companies on this process to become the most trusted voice in their space following this framework that I'm showing you. Half of our companies that we work with are B2B. And so please, as you're hearing this, don't allow yourself to make the statement that's going to hold you back of, yeah, but that's not the way that we've always done it, or yeah, we have a very customized solution, but we have a very unique buying process, but that's not the way our industry works, or our buyers don't need this, Marcus, because they're all highly educated, and yeah, but we're B2C, B2G, EFD, HIJK, we're service, product, big, small. Let's not put ourselves in the corner, because each time we need to focus on the principle. So even if I'm sharing what we did, let's say at a swimming pool company, that's a B2B2C company because it's a manufacturer that sells to builders, that sells to the homeowner, right? So we're a B2B2C. Each time, focus on the principle, not the fact that it's a swimming pool company talking here. That has nothing to do really with the conversation. It has to do with our businesses. Okay, so with that being said, if we want to become the voice of trust in our space, simple 3 things that we got to do. Number 1, we got to be willing to talk about what others in our space are not willing to talk about online. You might say, like, what are you talking about there, Marcus? Okay, we're going to get into that, of course. Number 2, we got to be willing to show that which no one else in our space, or at least the majority in our space, are not willing to show, like video, specific types of videos. And number 3, we've got to be willing to sell in a way that others aren't willing to sell. Now, that is innovation today. And I ask you, as you're thinking about this, of these 3, could you say right now, are you truly doing more so than 95% of your industry? You're going to get a bunch of ideas right now. Now, look, we only got about 25 minutes, so we don't have a ton of time, but we certainly got time. Here's the issue with they ask you answer. Most companies don't really follow it. Instead, they follow what we call ostrich marketing. Now, an ostrich, when it has a problem, what does it do? It buries its head in the sand, which is actually a total myth, but it's a cool visual, so we'll use it, right? Now, why does it bury its head in the sand? Because it thinks, what's going to happen with the problem? Problem's going to go away, but does the problem ever go away? No, the problem never goes away. So how does this apply to you and me? Has there ever been a question, a worry, a fear that you get all the time from your customers, from your prospects, that your sales team has heard a bunch of times, but you said to yourself, you know what, we really can't talk about that on the website. Why don't we just wait until they discuss it with the salesperson, but we can't really talk about it. No, we can't do that online. Can you think of one? I'm sure you can think of one as I'm listening this or asking this out right now. I'm sure there's a bunch going through your head. Problem is this: can you become the most trusted voice in your space and ignore the fundamental questions that your customers have? We can't do that, can we? I mean, they're just diametrically opposed. Now, here's what's so fascinating about the way we think, about they ask you answer, about the way you and I research. Essentially, when it comes to the way we research online, this is B2B, B2C, doesn't matter, service, product, doesn't matter. There's 5 subjects that we are constantly researching online. And what's so fascinating is we as buyers, consumers are obsessed with these 5, but businesses don't like to talk about these 5 things. So it creates a paradox of once. What are the 5 things? As buyers, as consumers, we are obsessed with how much is it? I want to feel for pricing. We want to know what are the problems or the negatives or the issues with it, whatever that thing is that we're researching. We want to know how does it compare to that other thing that we're looking at, comparisons. We want to know what's everybody saying about it, reviews. And finally, number 5, we want to know what is the best it, most, top, etc. Right? Those are the big 5. Think about how many times have you searched those phrases or a similar phrase for a product, for a service, as you've been doing research online. Hundreds and hundreds of times. This runs the internet. It runs the economy, yet we tend to ignore these fundamental questions. And so I'm going to show you now how you can address these. We're going to do it fast and furious. It's going to be fun. And we're going to start with the elephant in the room, which is dun, 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 cost and price on your website. Now, before you say, I'm out of here, stay with me. I promise it's going to make sense. Okay, so let's analyze our behavior. If I said to you, have you researched how much something costs online in the last year, what would you say? You'd say, yeah, of course I have, Marcus. And so when you're on a website and you're looking for cost and price and you cannot find any information on cost and price on that product or that service, what's the emotion you experience? You're like, I get pretty frustrated. So the question is, why do you get frustrated in that moment? You say, well, I get frustrated because like I'm the buyer, I'm the consumer. I'm just trying to get an answer so I can make a decision. Now, in that moment of frustration, do you say to yourself, "Well, I'm sure it's on this website somewhere. I'll just keep looking on this website until I find cost and price information." Now, that's totally ridiculous, right? Because we've done the studies on this, and guess how long somebody will stay on a website looking for cost and price information until they leave? The answer is about 10 seconds. Now, in that moment of frustration, do you as the buyer, do you as the searcher, do you say to yourself, well, that's okay that they're not talking about cost and price. They're a value-based business. I'm going to call them on the phone instead. You're like, no, Marcus, I don't. Because you as the buyer, you as the searcher, you keep doing what? You keep searching and you search until what happens, until you find what you're looking for. And generally speaking, whoever gives you what you were looking for, they're going to get what? And you're like, well, they're going to get my business. That's right. If not your business, at least they're going to get first contact, first phone call. Now, yeah, you might say, oh, I don't know about this, Marcus. Look, the real reason we get so upset as buyers, consumers, is because we know that they know the business, the answer. Because we know they know the answer and they're not giving it to us, we now feel like they're hiding something from us. And the moment you feel like anybody is hiding anything from you online, what happens? Trust is gone. Now, are you talking about cost and price on your website right now? Don't answer the question. Don't say anything in chat yet because you're like, you don't understand, Marcus. Stay with me. There's 3 reasons why we don't like to talk about cost and price on our websites. The first reason is we say it's a very customized solution. It depends. Okay, if I came to you and I said, can you help me understand the factors that drive the cost of your product or your service up? Could you explain that? Describe those factors. You'd say, of course I could, Marcus. If I said, can you help me understand the factors that would keep the cost down? Could you explain that? You'd say, yeah, here's the factors that would keep it down. If I said to you, you gave me a quote for your product or your service. I got some quotes from others in your industry. Some of you are real expensive. Some of you are more cheap. So can you help me understand why there's a delta in your industry? You'd say, yeah, of course. And if I asked you, how many times have you had to explain your pricing versus your competitor's pricing over the course of time? You'd say, actually, we do it all the time because this is just how business works. What's sad is oftentimes we don't explain our value proposition until when they ask. And by that point, they're how far through the buyer's journey? Way, way far. And many of them have already opted out because they made false assumptions about us, especially with our value. So the most easy to explain on your website isn't specifically what you cost. It's what drives costs up, what drives costs down in the industry, why some companies are expensive, why some companies are cheap. That defines value in the marketplace. It's the most essential. Now, the second reason we don't talk about cost and price is we say things like, well, we're more expensive. If we're more expensive, we just might scare them away. But what the science tells us over and over again is the thing that actually scares us away during the buying process isn't when they educate us really well and explain these things. What scares us is when they don't even address it. Because the moment they leave it blank, they plant the seed of doubt. Right, right, right. So we don't like to be ignorant. We hate ignorance in 2022 and beyond. And the third reason we don't talk about it, cost and prices, we say things like our competitors will find out. Well, that's silly too, because if I asked you roughly, what do your competitors charge? Like, do you have a sense for it? You'd say, of course I know what they charge. And if you know what they charge, they know what you charge. This is the big secret, non-secret. Everybody acts like nobody knows what everybody's charging, when in reality, everybody has a pretty good sense as to what everybody else is charging. Besides that, when was the last time your competitors paid your bills, right? Now, you're still not sold, let's say. You're like, Marcus, I'm still not feeling you. Okay, so when we embrace the philosophy, when we embrace this mindset, if they ask you answer, at River Pools, we said, okay, people ask us all the time, how much does a fiberglass pool cost? So we talked about how much does a fiberglass pool cost. We explained what drives cost up and what drives cost down, why some companies are expensive, why some companies are cheap. But we said, ultimately, the answer to your question is, it depends. But because we were willing to explain so much more than anybody had ever done, something really magical happened. People started to call me and say, finally, somebody was willing to address this question. You notice nobody taught you in school how much does a fiberglass swimming pool cost? Like you have no idea. Some of you listening to this might still think it costs $30,000 when the average is somewhere between $60,000 and $120,000, right? That's how it works. And not only that, from a search perspective, if you went online over the next couple of days, literally within 48 hours, and you search anything to do, and you can do this on your wonderful little Google machine right now, and you search price of fiberglass pool, how much does the fiberglass pool cost? This was one of the first ones you saw on the left side of the page, organic search results. Now, that's just web visitors. That's not leads. That's not revenue. Let's track it back to revenue. So let's look at this. Quick analytics, folks. I promise this will make sense, so stay with me. Here's a list of the number one phrases that generate the most traffic to the website over the next few years, okay? So let's look at one of the top ones here. We had 13,000 people go to Google and they typed in fiberglass pool prices. And of those 13,537, 30 of them filled out a form and said, I want to get a quote from you. So the number that you're seeing on the right side of the screen right now, these are sales appointments, okay? Now, what are the red arrows? The red arrows are phrases that when somebody searched that phrase online, they landed on that article. How much does a fiberglass pool cost? So we've got roughly 200 plus sales appointments that occurred here from people that originally landed on that article. How much does a fiberglass pool cost? Now, here's the very important question. If that article is never written, how many of those sales appointments ever occur? Of course, the answer is 0 to almost none. And how do we know that? We know that because they wouldn't have showed up, right? We wouldn't have started the conversation, but we did start the conversation. And because we started the conversation, many of them read, many of them filled out a form, many of them said, I want to get a quote. Many of them had a quote. Many of them ended up buying. We know the ones that bought, we know the value of their pools. And I can tell you without equivocation that that one single article since the day was written has now generated over $25 million in sales that we would not have had we not been willing to address the question. But did we ever say exactly how much a fiberglass pool cost? No. What do? We explained it. And here's the thing. If you don't explain it, who will? That's right, your competitors. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not down with that. This gives you a chance to earn trust by being more honest and following the golden rule, which is exactly what you want, somebody just to help you understand these things. And folks, we've done this now so many times for 90% of our clients. The number one lead generating content and ultimately revenue generating content has to do with cost and price and explaining value. All right, so that's the first one of the big five. Let's look at problems real quick. We got to do this fast, y'all. So number two of the big five that we always research is problems. We're obsessed with problems. Is it true that, hey, somebody told me that, so what could go wrong if? Turns out that it's only when we're really interested in buying something that we research what's wrong with it. People used to ask me all the time, Marcus, what are the problems of fiberglass pools? Now, do you think anybody had talked about that on their website? No. What are they afraid of? That's the elephant in the room. So we said, we go after the elephants and we bring the elephant to the front door. And so we openly talked about the problems with fiberglass pools and how to deal with those problems, the things that everybody else was saying, like the concrete pool builder. And because we were willing to do that, something really dang cool happened. Now look at this, folks. Notice I'm not giving you just like these ideas or theories without actual application and results. I'm a huge believer in actual measurable results. I think most business leaders responsible are just, we want to know that if we're going to spend on it, that we're getting the returns. That's why I'm showing you the returns here. It's not just theory. So let's look at this. Here's a list of the number one phrases that generated the most sales appointments. That's the number on the right side of the page over the next few years. Now, the one that generated the most sales appointments with 56 was River Pools and Spas, but I don't count that one because that's our company name. Those folks were looking for us already. The rest of the people that you see on the screen didn't know who they wanted to engage. They just knew they had a question. So the number one phrase that generated the most appointments over the next few years was fiberglass pool problems. How's it possible that talk about the problems with your stuff could, in this case, generate what ended up being millions of dollars in additional revenue? And of course, the answer is trust, because the greatest way in life to resolve a concern is to address it when? Yep, before it becomes a concern. Not being reactive, but being proactive, getting in front of it. You've heard it many times. So you've been asked many times before, is it true that somebody told me that, your competitor said that, I heard about such and such? Can you address those and own the conversation and win the trust? Of course you could, but that's up to you, or you can let your competitors do it. Let's look at comparisons. People, gosh, we love to compare stuff online, don't we? You love it, I love it, we all love to compare stuff online. So we're constantly comparing things. People used to ask me all the time, Marcus, be honest, what's the difference between a concrete and a fiberglass pool? Or tell me, why should I choose a fiberglass over a concrete pool? And hopefully you're thinking about all the comparison questions you've heard over the years with your product or service. Now, no fiberglass pool company had addressed the question concrete versus fiberglass on their website. When we started, they asked you to answer. Why not? Literally because they're thinking, okay, our biggest competitor is concrete pools. And so this is how we're going to deal with it. We're not even going to talk about concrete pools on our website. And if we don't talk about concrete pools, well, then nobody will know they exist, which is pretty much the dumbest logic you've probably ever heard, but that's the way we think sometimes as humans. So we said, yeah, that's pretty dumb. We're going to openly talk about it because everybody wants to know and we're constantly being asked. And so we wrote this article right here, fiberglass versus vinyl versus concrete pools, an honest comparison. And we didn't say fiberglass was better because they're not always better. Sometimes they are. What do buyers want? They just want to be explained the facts. and then allowed to choose. Look at the first paragraph. Is there an unbiased comparison of fiberglass and ground, vinyl liner, and concrete pools on the internet? That's what the buyer's thinking. They ask, you answer. Look at the last paragraph. The approach is simple. I list the advantages and disadvantages of fiberglass, vinyl, and concrete pools, and then back off so you can form your own opinion. This is what the marketplace is asking for. So few companies are willing to do this. When you're willing to do this and think like this and address the questions that other people do not in your space, the amount of trust that you can accumulate is unbelievable. Final one I'm going to show you. Oh, by the way, today, if you go online and you compare any type of in-ground pool, we're one of the first ones you're going to see. We own the conversation. We even own the conversation for concrete versus vinyl pool. We don't sell those pools. But now we can answer the question and inject ourselves into the conversation. So powerful. That's the beauty of the Ask You Answer. And number 5, we're going to combine these last two, reviews and best. And this is a crazy story. I think you're going to love this one. Stay with me. You're going to be like, what the heck, pool guy? So used to be that people would ask me all the time, so Marcus, we like you, but if we don't do business with you, is there anybody else you might recommend? And one night I was in Richmond, Virginia, and I met with this couple for like 2.5 hours. And at the end, they said to me, this was like 10 years ago, by the way, so I'm still selling pools. Hey, Marcus, we like you, but if we don't get this pool from you, is there anybody else you might recommend? And I thought to myself, dang it, why are they asking me this question? That means they're probably not going to buy tonight. And they didn't buy. But I had a long drive home and I thought, well, they asked the question, which means, that's right, I need to answer it. So I went back that night and I wrote this article right here. Who are the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia? Reviews/ratings. And I came up with a list of 5 of the best pool builders in Richmond, Virginia. This was our #1 market at the time. And guess what? I didn't even put myself on the list of 5. And you're like, what, Marcus? Yeah, because if you create a best of list and then you put yourself on said list, it makes you look biased. And of course, our business is rooted in what? Trust. And so we openly talked about this. And what happened as a result of this? Addressing the elephant in the room. Well, today, if you go online, you search best pool builders, Richmond, Virginia, we're the first ones you're going to see. But this is really, really cool. Let's say you went online, you search reviews, Playmore pools, because that's my biggest competitor in Richmond, Virginia. Okay, you went to Google. That's what you search, reviews, Playmore pools, Richmond, Virginia. The second one you're going to see after Yelp, and nobody uses Yelp anyway for pools, is who? River Pools and Spas. And that's why whenever you're researching our competitors online, oftentimes who you're going to learn about them from, you're going to read about them on our website. Do we ever say anything negative? Of course not. Nothing negative at all. But we just factually address the questions that they have. I literally had a customer come to me like 8-9 years ago. She said, craziest thing happened, Marcus. I was this close to buying a pool from Playmore Pools. But before I bought that pool from Playmore, I decided to go online and research their company. And as I was researching their company, I stumbled across this article that you guys had written. I said, my goodness, these guys are so honest. I should probably call them too. And of course, you know what happened, don't you? Because otherwise I wouldn't be telling you the story. She bought that pool because she was like, man, I just love this company's honesty, right? And so that article generated over like $200,000 in revenue its first year. And you might be saying, but aren't you afraid you've introduced them to the competition? Folks, if somebody wants to know who our competitors are, it's going to take them less than a second to figure it out. So how about we just treat them like educated, informed human beings? And it's amazing the trust we can earn in the process. So we would go on to start from 2,000 visitors a month to our website to 600,000. And this past year, during the summer, we hit about 1 million visitors to our website a month during the summertime. It's the most trafficked swimming pool website in the world. Now, I just want to close with one last story. I'm in Boston, Mass right now for an event, and one of the great They Ask You Answer case studies is Yale Appliance. Now, Yale Appliance came to me, and this is her CEO, Steve Scheinkoff. And if you've ever researched an appliance online, you've probably come across their website, one of the best They Ask You Answer websites in the world. Steve said, Marcus, our traffic's not growing. I'm trying to do this whole inbound marketing. I'm confused. And I said, you're not following the big 5, buddy. You really got to start thinking like your buyers. And one of the things he did, he said to all of his sales reps that work at Yale, it's like, listen, you've got to be subject matter experts and help the marketing team. So that's that first big step. And then we started to produce some of the gutsiest content that I've ever seen. This will blow you away, folks. One of the questions that Steve, as an appliance store, gets selling kitchen appliances that he hears all the time is, okay, so what are your like least service brands that you sell? What's the most reliable brands that you sell? And so every year now, Steve produces this piece right here. Now, at first, he was reserved about this. He's like, oh, Marcus, you think I should do this? I'm like, I'm telling you, this is going to be huge for us. And so I want you to look at the second and fourth paragraph. One of the benefits of having a huge service department is data collection. We will be in approximately 130 to 150 homes today fixing appliances, with a good portion being less than a year old and under warranty. That's 650 homes per week, or roughly 34,000 calls yearly, not including homes with multiple calls. That's the math behind this post. It's sales generated versus warranty service calls within 1 year. And final paragraph. So the question is, what are we fixing the least? And here's where it gets crazy, y'all. Here's where it gets crazy. He shows you the brand that he sells, okay, the number one brand in terms of units sold and total units serviced. But he also shows you the most serviced brand that he sells. And this is how you become an absolute linchpin, a thought leader, a gatekeeper of information in your space. He's a digital David in the land of Goliath. He gets comments like this all over the world. Your objective appliance and house recommendations are incredibly valuable. Oh, I love you so much. He hears stuff like that all the time. Here's what happened with the traffic. Today, Yale Appliance gets almost 1 million visitors a month to their website. They're the most trafficked kitchen appliance website in the United States, and they're just a little retailer in Boston, Massachusetts. And they went from $37 million a year when they started, they Ask You Answer. And this year they'll do $180 million in sales. And that's with almost zero advertising. And margins are up in a time when so many others, the margins are down. That's what's crazy. And the final thoughts from Yale is, we've tracked it, and this isn't the most updated number, but from the content on their website, They Ask You Answer content, we've been able to track at least 6,000 customers that started from the website, that went to the store and bought, because they don't even do the e-commerce. It's crazy. And that's the power of becoming that voice of trust. And so now, my friends, I'm excited for your questions. A couple next steps real quick. Make sure you read the book. I'm an amazing follow on LinkedIn, I promise. And become the voice of trust in your space. That's my personal email at the bottom. And Abby, if there's any questions, I'm ready to answer them.
Whew. I feel like I just had like a brisk 3-mile run. Like,
yeah, it's good, right?
My
cardio.
blood's moving. I appreciate your energy so much. If folks have questions, I think that someone may have raised their hand. Please enter your question into the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. You'll see a Q&A box. Please just type your question in there, and we can read them from there. So the first question I want to ask is, just curious, because I saw you speak last year. You're out speaking a lot. Before we came on here, you were kind of on a road show of doing all kinds of talks this week. What are you seeing right now with specific business challenges, like right now, as compared to maybe what you were seeing 2 or 3 years ago? Like, I'm curious what the unique challenges are like right now today.
Well, I think we see the same challenges being magnified, right? So what that basically means is we're becoming more impatient when we can't find what we're looking for. We're more impatient when it comes to hoops to jump through in order to make purchases. We hate friction. We hate anything that is like a hassle that will slow us down. Now, one of the big trends, and I have a whole presentation on this, Abby, is what we call seller free and self-service. And so we had that seller free stat when we started. So that means, how can we replicate parts of the sales process on our website? That's where they can get recommendations without talking to a human. So let me give you an example, Abby. Let's say if you went to the river pool site and you weren't sure, what's the best type of swimming pool for my situation, for my needs? Let's say you don't know. Well, we literally have this essentially almost like a recommendation tool that is incredibly honest, and based on the inputs from the questions that we ask you in this recommendation tool, then we give you an assessment of where you are, and we'll even recommend to you, based on what you said, Abby, you should probably get a concrete pool, and here's why. So that's really powerful. That's called self-service. And there's different types of self-service, but these are things that folks should be thinking about. In conjunction with your content strategy, self-service tools like pricing calculators, assessment tools, etc., they're going to become huge for us as we go forward. We're not spending enough time talking about it, but that's a really, really big deal. Folks are struggling with that, with this whole seller-free mindset out there.
Ooh, thank you. And while you were speaking, like 30 questions came blazing in, so I'm trying to sort through them.
Okay.
A lot of these have to do with specific industries. How does this work in this industry? How does it work in that? And I know that you talked a little bit about that. I don't necessarily want to go
So
through all of those, but
one
there
of
is
the
that, how does this work in my specific situation? I have professional engineering services, someone that's
yeah. So is it okay, Abby, with you if I blow through some of these
Absolutely.
on the Q&A?
Do it.
Okay, so when it comes to professional services or anything that's service-based, remember, a lot of times you're thinking, well, how you do this? How would you do something like cost and price with that? It's like, I literally would say to you, right, what's going to drive the cost up? What's going to drive the cost down? What causes companies in your service industry to be more expensive? What are the factors that make them less expensive? And then oftentimes it's good that if you can give a general range, I think a range is healthy. You don't have to, but a range is nice. And so it's very easy to do that. I've never had a company, never a single one, even like a financial advisor, let's say, financial advisors like, well, the way we make money is a little bit different. Okay. How do you make money? How does it work? How do you earn revenue from your clients? Right. And so then there's a whole conversation to be had around there. Also, I was thinking about financial advisors, investment advisors. They oftentimes are dealing with things like compliance and regulation. And so they say, I can't do this, Marcus. No, you can. Well, let me tell you how really quickly, everybody. The key to they ask you answer is you understand the actual strategy is they ask, you address it really, really well. But that's not a good title for a book. So we call it they ask you answer. Remember, you don't have to specifically answer, but you do have to be willing to address the question. Okay. So that's a really big key. Andrea said, regarding Yale Appliance, when the owner published a KitchenAid poor service numbers, how did that impact his relationship with the supplier? That's right, because most people are too worried about the OEM, the vendor, the supplier. And they're like, oh, I can never do that. Steve's more worried about, that's right, the customer, the end user. And what happened? Well, KitchenAid said, I don't like this. And Steve said, I don't like it either. I guess you guys are going to have to do a lot better. Did they drop him? No, because he is the digital David in the land of Goliath, and they need him. They're all want to be now part of Yale Appliance. They're begging. GE, he dropped them for a while and they begged back in because he has so much influence in the space, right? So that's what happens when you become that big influencer, okay? Do you recommend any tools, social listening tools, to find out what kind of questions? Okay, Jill. Best keyword tool in the world, your ears by far, and listening to sales calls. It's not even close. There is a good tool that I do like. It's called answerthepublic.com. Answerthepublic.com is a good way to get some of those questions, but the best way by far is spend time with your sales team and really start to think in the context of the way people ask or search it, etc. Okay. So one of the things that we have found in terms of efficiency with content creation. Now, keep in mind, folks, I tell you this, I stayed up until midnight, 1 a.m. for 2 straight years, writing articles, making videos because I couldn't afford to hire anybody and I was going to go out of business. And so when folks tell me, I don't have the time to do this, Marcus, I'm like, actually, you're just not feeling enough pain yet. If you feel enough pain, we find the time to do that which we value. It's just how life works. Now, if I could go back or if I could do it differently, if I had a choice, at the time I didn't, I would hire a journalist on staff, not outsource. I would hire an in-house journalist. Now, some of you are saying, how much content do you need? We actually have the data on this. It's empirical. I've got so many case studies on this. Like, we just scratched the surface today. What we have found definitively that if you do 3 they ask you answer style, very buyer-based question style articles a week, generally more than 1,000 words a piece. Oftentimes they average about 12 to 1,500 words. 3 a week for 18 straight months, you'll dominate your industry and your traffic, leads, and sales will explode online. Period. We see it over and over again. That's the actual numbers. Most people say, well, it depends. No, I'm just going to give you an actual real number. Isn't that nice? It's great. It's like talking about cost and price. Okay. So John said, what about nonprofits doing fundraising with ultra high net worth clients? It's the same principles. And with nonprofits, they research the big 5 when they are actually trying to understand, like, what's going to happen with my donations, with my money? How does this actually, how does this work? What are the best nonprofits for such and such? That's another one. This nonprofit versus that nonprofit. That's another one. So like all this content strategy we've talked about works really well with nonprofits. I've spoken at a lot of nonprofits events. I'm telling you, I've done the research in that space. Absolutely applies. Very much so. Abby, any other questions that you're seeing that you really want me to answer? Because there's about a whole bunch, and I know I'm gonna not hit them all.
I'm just loving you going through them. So if any of them jump out at you, I see Diane's question. I know Diane well. She works in radio and television. Our website is for listeners, is for our listeners and viewers. Advertisers aren't going to our website for sales info. how would you address that? We make sales based on the number of viewers and listeners, but the buyers are advertising agencies and retail as a rule.
Okay, so one of the things is our advertisers aren't going to our website for sales information. Generally, we reap what we sow online and in life. And what we have found is when somebody, generally, I'm not saying this is the case with you, Diane, but generally speaking, whenever anybody says, that's not the way that our buyers really learn and consume online and make decisions, we see over and over again that if you do the big five correctly, that's not the case. You start to absolutely get inbound leads because you're talking about things nobody's talked about in your space. And I can tell you right now, when it comes to radio and television, Diane, nobody's doing they ask you answer very well. You just don't see it in that space. And so I would challenge you to test it and just see and track it with a tool like, let's say, a HubSpot or something like that. The reason why I was able to show you all revenue numbers today is because I track all the revenue through tools. And the main tool, of course, that we use is HubSpot. So hopefully you'll give that a shot. Jay Machado said, what
Yeah,
about—
I like that question. Yeah,
reviews on products? How's that affect your business? Here's the thing about reviews, and this is the part that everybody generally, I shouldn't say everybody, most do wrong. And that is, we say, let's do a review on this particular product or service. And we say, here's why it's awesome. And that's not really how you're supposed to do reviews. So if I'm going to do a review, I'm going to say, okay, so today, folks, we're going to do a review on the XYZ 1000. Now, even though we sell the XYZ 1000, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk honestly and transparently about who it's for, who it's not for. We're going to talk about the pros, and we're going to talk about the cons. We're going to talk about the pricing. And by the end of this video, hopefully you'll know if the XYZ 1000 is the right fit for you. Now, you can replicate that intro on every article and every video you pretty much ever do. You see that style over and over again with they ask you answer people because that's what the marketplace wants. But the key is, for a great review, you have to show both sides of the coin. Most companies do not show both sides of the coin. You have to talk about who it is and who it's not a good fit for. This is where the trust comes from. And this is really golden rule marketing here. We're treating them exactly as we ourselves would want to be educated, would want to be treated in that moment. And I think ultimately we find that makes us feel good in the process. Okay. Amelia, what are the best practices for persuading companies to adopt this approach if you were to present to them as a growth opportunity? So the number one email that I get, Amelia, I know this is over the course of more than 10 years now talking about this stuff, is Marcus, I am the most frustrated marketer. I know this would work in my company, my organization. I can't get leadership. I can't get sales to buy in. Yeah, a lot of stallions out there that are fenced in. And if stallions can't run, what do? They either jump the fence or they die, right? And so how does this work? Well, as when someone comes up to me and says, how do I do this? I give an answer that is somewhat good and somewhat bad. I'm going to give that now, Amelia. Sad thing is, you've probably heard the phrase, you can be a prophet to the world, but nobody will listen to you in your hometown. If I preach they ask you answer to my kids and my wife, they're like, that's dumb. If I teach it to the rest of the world, they're like, this is great, because I'm in my hometown, right? And so it's the same thing. A lot of marketers really, really struggle to get the buy-in. So here's what I suggest: that you don't go to your team and say, hey, I heard this pool guy, it was actually really good, and we should start answering all of our customers' questions on our website. Instead of that, you literally get the book and you give it to somebody on your leadership team, and you say, would you be willing to read this book if I give it to you? And they say, yeah, okay. And then can we talk about it when you're done? You do not give them any preview of the book. You just say, I think it'll be important for us to have a conversation on this. Because then anything that they derive from the book is their idea. It's theirs. They own it for themselves. It's just the weird thing about human psychology. We like to feel everything was our idea. And so if you do that, and then you have a conversation about it, that's when you start to get momentum. Then the next step oftentimes is some type of workshop with a they ask you answer trainer, somebody like myself, team members like ours. We do a lot of those. And there's a lot of different options that you have. But it really starts with reading the book. That's the most important thing by far. Okay.
I think we're just about done, Marcus, time-wise.
Man, that was just too fun, Abby.
was about to say, that was a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun with you. Again, love your energy, love all the questions and the diversity of questions. I think we got to the bulk of them. Obviously, we have the book up here, so folks are invited to pick it up. And I'm sure Marcus has his email there. If you have questions that weren't answered or you have specific questions related to your business, I'm sure that he would love to hear from you and help you out with that. So a huge thank you, Marcus, for taking the time out while you're on your road show of speaking. Glad that you were able to stop in. If folks are able to fill out the quick survey that we have in the chat, just to let us know what you thought of the sessions, that we can continue to improve these, we would greatly appreciate that. And we hope to see you on a virtual gathering here soon. Thank you again, Marcus, for being here. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's a lot of fun.